Okay, so what's going to happen, Bridget, is I'll count it down when Javier tells me that it's good to go. He'll
Okay.
record it, and then if
Right.
you could look at the camera whole
Right.
rather than the
Remember to do
screen.
that. Yes.
Yeah, it's a little
Okay.
bit difficult. And
Yep.
towards the end, what'll happen is when I close off the interview, then we'll just
Yes.
both wait for a few minutes for Javier to come back on to let us know that everything was
Okay.
okay.
And I understand because this is being taped, if something awful happens, like the front doorbell rings or whatever, or I say, oh, I'm having a coughing fit, which would not be COVID. But I don't need to worry about being absolutely
We
perfect.
can, yeah,
Oh,
we can always take it back, right?
yeah.
And then start from the last sentence or something like that.
Okay, very good.
Yeah,
Yep.
so
Thank you so
that's
much.
okay. No, my
Okay.
pleasure. My
Okay.
pleasure.
Thank you, Noel.
So one last question,
Yes.
Bridget, to properly pronounce your last name, it's Campion, right?
Campion. That's exactly
Perfect.
right.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
good, good.
Campion. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And count? Okay. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Okay, 5, 4, 3. Hello, Dr. Bridget Campion. Thanks so much for joining us today for this episode of Hope from Home.
Thank you so very much, Noel, for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to have, something to do during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Listen, as a bioethicist with the Canadian Catholic Bioethics Institute, I'm hoping that you can shed some light on the ethical concern that some people have with COVID-19 vaccines being derived from cells of aborted fetuses. In your opinion, Dr. Bridget, how should a responsible Catholics think about this?
Well, it is a big issue. On the one hand, we know that until there is a vaccine, life will not return to what it was. We will have to continue to be vigilant. At any time, we would be moving forward and expanding, but be ready to take it back again if there are further outbreaks. As I say, we will just be in a state of constant vigilance until a vaccine is discovered. And it's a very serious thing. COVID is a very serious thing. We are getting a sense of the lives lost, especially among the most vulnerable members of our communities. Older persons, for instance, in the United States, African Americans are overrepresented among deaths and serious illness. We also know that for the survivors of COVID, life is not easy. And we know that COVID has been, we know theoretically that COVID is devastating to the economy. We're going to find out more exactly what that means as time goes on. So a vaccine is imperative, but at the same time, as you're pointing out, for Catholics of conscience who are saying, but a vaccine, the research, it seems to be involving aborted, and here we don't mean miscarried, we mean actually aborted fetal human beings. So, is it the case that we have to do an either or? How does a person come down on one side or the other with this? So the issue that you're bringing up is a very, very important one, very important. And if you were asking me, what's a good Catholic to do, basically, well, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. There will be those people who will say, oh, but these abortions happened so long ago. And in many cases, the stem cell lines that have been derived from fetuses who were aborted, these babies were aborted in the 1960s. So this is a very long time ago. And researchers continue to use, and it's not as if these are the only babies who are involved, okay? Scientists continue to use fetal tissue from aborted human beings. But we can't just say that, well, it happened such a long time ago, life goes on, and we can't also just say, well, we had nothing to do with the abortion. It happened, we had nothing to do with it, surely we can make use of this. No, we have to understand how abortion is. And when I say this, I want to be extremely clear. I would never, ever say that a person procuring an abortion is necessarily evil, because we do not know the circumstances under which a person might be doing this. But the act itself is something very grave and very heinous. So we can't lose sight of that. So what is a good Catholic to do? The thing about the Catholic Church is this. Certainly we believe in faith informed by reason, by understanding. So we are very much alive to using our God-given reason. On the other hand, the Church is extremely pastoral and understands that we do live in an imperfect world. And church teaching, at least what I've come across in Donum Vitae and Dignitatis Personae, is fairly clear. For parents, for instance, who wish to vaccinate their children against deadly disease, if there are no other alternatives, then surely it is possible to use those vaccines, even understanding and never losing sight of the evil that abortion is. And it seems to me that this could easily be applied then to COVID-19, because we are looking at children who may need to be vaccinated, older people in long-term care facilities who need to be vaccinated, staff who care for the ill who need to be vaccinated, parents themselves who need to be vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So that's more or less where the church is right now on it.
Okay. Do you think that pro-life advocates should boycott this or any other vaccine derived from the same biological matter?
Well, I'm never going to stop anybody from doing what they feel called to do, okay? Mm. But if you're asking me how I see it, I personally think that we are being called to build the kingdom of God. And I mean that quite literally, building the kingdom of God, which means taking a look at the world in which we have been placed, which is an imperfect world. Remember, like since the earliest times, this has been the challenge for Christians to say, how do we be church in the world? Pretty easy for the earliest Christians. Well, easy, except that they were, being martyred, okay? But fairly easy because it was such a small group. But as the church grew, and as the end of the world did not come, and as the church became more diverse and engaged more with the world, this became an extremely important question. So what do we do now, with COVID-19 and viruses and vaccines? And as I say, we're about building the kingdom. Just a little tangent for a minute here. For about like the last 3 or 4 years, I've been talking about medically assisted dying, medical assistance in dying. You could call it medically induced death if you wish. And the thing is, people have been saying to me, well, Dr. Campion, surely if we had better palliative care, this would not be an issue. And for years, I have been saying, it's got nothing to do with palliative care. It has to do with long-term care. That's the weak link in the chain. The idea that we have a whole system set up where institutions where people are saying, I would rather be dead than be here, okay? And so when we're talking about medical assistance in dying, to my mind, the antidote is to be building places of care, to be building a healthcare system and a long-term care system where people feel loved, cherished, where they can find meaning in the lives and in this particular state of life. In other words, build the kingdom of God. So when it comes to something like COVID, aborted fetuses, vaccines, we have to be looking at alternatives rather than boycotting. Okay, I have a little joke with a friend of mine. We talked about the importance of making these face masks, right? And I'm telling her now, look, you've made 500 face masks. What we have been working on right now is a vaccine, okay? Like that's the thing that we have to be putting our minds to. We have to look for alternatives. If fetal tissue is absolutely essential, and I'm not a scientist, I don't know. Maybe fetal tissue is simply easier, which is not a justification. If it is essential, then what about a child who was lost through miscarriage? We know that babies die, and we know that parents make the incredible decision to donate a heart so that another baby can live. If we believe that this child who's been miscarried, is a child of God, and you know, is it an act of charity then, and not an obligation, but an act of charity to say that, well, if you need fetal tissue, we we miss this child that we wish we could have had, but we in all love donate this. And of course, if it turns out that fetal tissue is not absolutely necessary to this, well, for heaven's sakes, let's start looking for alternatives.
Thank you so much, Dr. Campion. I really appreciate your sharing your thoughts with us. You gave a lot of things to think about.
And thank you very much. Again, this is such an important issue. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Noel.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, how was that, Javier?
Okay, so how was that?
I think it was good. Thank you. I didn't ask the last two questions